Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Nicole Vignola Show. It is 2025. Oh my gosh, I don't know about you guys, but I feel like 2024 just flew by. Did you get all of the things that you wanted to do in 2024 done? So I made a promise to myself that I was going to stick to guitar, and I absolutely did. I went to lessons every single week. Obviously, not every single week. Maybe I cancelled here and there, but I will show you guys. I promise I will. I've gotten quite good. I think, for a beginner anyway. Super proud of that one. I had a couple of goals around fitness wise. I just wanted to get a little bit stronger, purely because I was in an accident when I was 18 and my back's been a bit funky since. And so it's like imperative for me to lift, and I just wanted to get stronger and maintain that strength, because I don't really have any major goals to lift super heavy or do any crazy things in the gym. I just wanted to be able to lift my body weight and consistently be able to do that, so that my back can stay healthy and I don't have any flare-ups. And so I'd love to hear what your goals were for 2024. If you could put them in the comment box, I want to hear from you. So January motivation, you're going to see it everywhere. You're going to see it plastered on every single infographic post on Instagram and magazines. And you know what? I think we should actually take advantage of it. There are so many people who bang on about, the January motivation and make jokes about all the people that are now suddenly going to the gym. I think we should congratulate everybody for trying instead of, always focusing on the negative. So let's get a little bit more into motivation and see how we can use it to our advantage to actually make those habits stick once and for all, so that we can rewire our brains to improve and finally get everything that we wanted to achieve. My current goal this year is to learn some carpentry. As many of you know, I bought a house in Portugal, and one of the things that I despise is not being able to do things myself, and I get really frustrated, which is something that I need to personally work on. But that's why I always take things into my own hands, and I'm like, okay, well then I'll just learn how to do it. And I think carpentry is one of those things that I just love to be able to do, because if I want to fix something or just quickly build something, for example, there's this cabinet that I would like to build it's just so simple, and I don't trust myself to know how to do it, and I don't want to waste the materials and the time, blah, blah, blah. So if I knew how to do it, it would be a fairly simple, straightforward thing to do. I'm going to learn carpentry this year, and then I'm going to show you guys photos of my house. Okay, first things first, as always, I'm going to break it down into the science first, and then I'm going to give you the steps. So phase 1, phase 2. Phase 1 is what is going on in your brain. We're understanding dopamine, we're understanding motivation, we're understanding the neurochemicals at play. And then phase 2 is what you actually do to make sure that these habits stick. So as far as I'm concerned, I think that we should really, really hone in on this whole motivation wave that we have all been embarking on this January. If you haven't, that's absolutely fine. I think that it's a good thing. I think that we should hype it up, because motivation wanes. It's not one of those things that remains. It's definitely one of those things that when you have it, I think you should really grab it by the horns and run with it. Is that the expression? I don't really know, actually. I suppose that through osmosis, with everybody being so highly motivated this month, I think that we could sort of absorb some of that energy from our surroundings and the people around us, instead of sort of rolling our eyes and scoffing. I think really just ride that wave. So what is motivation? So down to a biological level, it is driven by dopamine. Dopamine is the molecule that puts you in anticipation drive, or puts you in pursuit of attaining a reward. So when we have an anticipated reward, we are working towards something, dopamine increases in response to getting you towards that reward. Dopamine essentially signals to your brain that something enjoyable and pleasurable is coming, and therefore we should go for it. It basically drives you to act upon it so that you can get to that end goal. But here's the caveat: it can wane, it can change, it can also fluctuate, and it can disappear because you gain a different reward, predominantly an immediate reward. So let's say you want to start eating healthy, and right now you've got the motivation to do it. It requires quite a lot of effort for neural pathways to change, for something like that to become habitual, especially if you have not really ever eaten healthily. And so what will happen is that over time you'll start to think, there is an immediate reward. I could just order the food in instead of cooking healthy, because that dopamine that's putting you in pursuit of the reward doesn't really differentiate between immediate reward and long-term rewards. And that's where your frontal cortex, your ability to make sound decisions, comes in. And you have to learn. It is a skill to learn to not give in to that immediate reward, because that immediate reward is always there. It's around us. We live predominantly in a time where we can just attain anything at our fingertips. We can scroll, we can text the person we like, we can order food on Deliveroo or Uber Eats or wherever you are in the world, and there's food deliveries. And so it is becoming increasingly easier for us to go for the easy decision. It is becoming increasingly easier for us to choose the easy way out. And when you're tired and when you've had a stressful day at work and the neural pathways haven't been carved out to, cook or eat healthy or go to the gym, your brain will prioritize immediate rewards and the path that is more traveled. Which brings me to my next point, neuroplasticity. So neuroplasticity, as many of you guys will know if you've read my book Rewire, I explain it extensively in there, is the ability for your brain to adapt and change according to different circumstances and environments. What that means is that you have the ability to change ingrained pathways and ingrained habits if you so wish, which is a wonderful thing. But it does require attention and it does require patience, because your brain is not really concerned with making changes. You have to actively push that change. So if we think about these pathways, you've got one that's been deeply ingrained. It's a nice tarmac highway. You can go down that route every single time. Perhaps it's the one that you do, which is not going to the gym, lazing around on the sofa, scrolling social media, not cooking food, whatever it is, that has been ingrained. And let me tell you, there are no morals in neuroplasticity. It is only what has been repeated. And your brain will go down the easier route based on what has been repeated every single time if you let it. It requires an immense amount of energy to shift those neural pathways into something else, because you have to carve out these new pathways. You have to dig the trenches. You have to lay down the flower beds. You have to put down the bricks. You have to put the lampposts up. You have to do all of that work to get you to this new place. And I'm not saying that because I want you to feel like, oh, this is hard, but I want you to have grace and understand that it requires patience, effort, intensity, attention, etc. And I'm going to give you the key components to neuroplasticity. There are two. There is intensity and there is frequency. The brain is concerned with repetition. You could learn something very, very, very quickly if you went on an intensive and you spent maybe a month in a retreat with nothing else available to you except pottery or carpentry. I have a full-time job, I have dogs, I have a life, I'm traveling for work. So for me to learn carpentry is going to be something that I'm going to have to do in my spare time. If I were to go on my retreat and learn carpentry for 30 days, I would give myself a better chance at being a good carpenter. Oh, the thought of me being a carpenter is actually so cool. Like Bob the Builder, Nick the Builder. But because I don't have that time, I don't have that level of intensity to give to carpentry, I'm going to be doing it as and when, in my spare time, maybe on the weekends, etc. And so what will happen is it will take a lot slower to build, and that's absolutely fine. What might happen is that motivation will drop off and I will lose the motivation to want to do it, and I'll end up thinking, I might as well just call someone to do it. Which defeats the purpose, because I want to be able to know how to do it. So you've got intensity and you've got frequency, and that is what the brain operates on. It wants to know that it's doing this repetitively, because the more that one neuron, please, there's not just one neuron communicating with one other neuron, but for simplicity, I'm going to explain it as one neuron communicates with another neuron. The more that the one neuron sends information to the other neuron, the better the receiving neuron becomes at receiving that information. And it becomes better at receiving that information because what it does is it increases the receptors on the membrane, on the postsynaptic membrane of the neuron that is now ready to receive the neurotransmitters. If you've got more receptors, you've got more cell surface for these neurotransmitters to bind, which means that you've got more communication coming into that postsynaptic cell, which means that now these two neurons, again, there's more than two neurons, but for simplicity, these two neurons become quote unquote married to one another, and so the communication between them becomes more effective. And over time, it becomes habitual without you having to think about it. But in the beginning, you have to actively send those neurotransmitters to this new place so that the new neurons can become better at receiving that information. I really hope that that's landed, because I think that's a really beautiful way of explaining it. And so it requires time, it requires intensity. If you've got one or the other, great. If you don't have either, then you're going to have to spread this out for a longer period of time. And maybe guitar playing or maybe carpentry will take you 2 years, 3 years, 4 years to learn instead of 1 month. I don't think you can learn guitar in a month personally, but do you see what I'm getting at? And obviously there are nuances to it because it depends on what level you want to be playing at. I mean, I'm never going to be a professional musician, but I hope you get my point. Okay, so how do habits form? Going back to that dopamine. Dopamine, we know, spikes when you anticipate a reward. And what that does is that it pairs that anticipation with a cue. So I'm going to focus on a negative habit. For example, smoking or drinking. So if you are stressed or it is 5 o'clock in the afternoon, you've just finished work, your brain has anticipated that you usually have a drink which brings you a reward, or probably doesn't bring you a reward. You just think that it's bringing you a reward because the anticipation of the reward is what's driving you to act upon that particular habit. And so what that means is that this cue that triggers the behavior has been paired with a particular thing. And so your brain learns to release dopamine at these particular cues. So maybe it's when your phone buzzes, dopamine reward. Ooh, let's go check that notification. Or you smell coffee, or I personally wake up and coffee is the first thing I think about. And so your brain is now in anticipation drive of the reward. So now you've got the cue, which triggers the routine, which is the action itself, which then brings about the reward. And that then reinforces that cue. And so you've got this habit loop that goes cue, routine, reward, and the reward reinforces that cue and it strengthens it over time. And that is why when you walk into your grandmother's house, you think of cookies, even though when you walk into your own house, you don't, because your brain has triggered dopamine that tells you by association that there are cookies coming because grandmother baked them. And then that reinforces that cue every single time when you do get them. So every time you go to granny's house, you get the cookies and it reinforces the cue when you walk in through the door. So back to motivation, we know that motivation could be intrinsic, meaning that is something that is driving you internally, or extrinsic, something that is driving you externally. So for example, extrinsic motivation means that you have a wedding coming up and you want to lose weight. Intrinsic motivation is you want to feel better about yourself and so therefore you want to lose weight. Neither is better or worse. You know, there are no morals. Sometimes whatever works. Intrinsic, you could argue that is better because it comes from a place of, you know, long-lasting change. But, you know, there are nuances because that's just one particular example. But, you know, when we're talking about work-related motivation, are you going to be intrinsically motivated to work if you're not getting compensated for it? For what, you know? But maybe you're somebody like me who needs to have intrinsic motivation because I work on my own goals. I don't work for somebody else. But so there's a lot of nuance there. Do you see what I'm saying? So if you work in a corporate job, extrinsic motivation is going to drive you to want to do the work. Intrinsic to some degree as well, especially if you have good leadership and you've got good managers and you've got a good team around you. But really at the end of the day, the extrinsic bonus is going to be the rewarding factor as to whether you actually really push. I would think so anyway. And again, you can kind of assess this in your life. What brings you intrinsic motivation? What brings you extrinsic? And what do you need? Because sometimes you need extrinsic motivation and sometimes you need intrinsic and sometimes you need a bit of both. So I'm not making this more simple for you. But what I'm trying to get at is that motivation does eventually disappear. And when we have it, I really think that we should hone in on it because it does go away. And so what do we do when motivation wanes? And unfortunately, that is when discipline and consistency comes in. So the difference between somebody that doesn't get it done and falls off the bandwagon and the person that does get it done and finishes it at the end of the year is that both went through the phases of motivation. It's just that at some point when the motivation disappeared, the person that continued through it consistently is the person that managed to get it done. It's not like they have this magic pill for motivation and they want to do it when they wake up in the morning. It's just that they've learned to just do it anyway. Do it anyway. I mean, Nike has the best slogan ever, just do it. It's simple, but it's true. You've got to just do it. And so I'm going to give you the steps on how to make sure that you are consistently doing this over time so that you can have these different checkpoints so that by the end of the year, you can pat yourself, congratulate yourself, and hashtag rewire yourself with Nick. So step number 1, the biggest trick in the book. Oh, I love this one. You've got to pair something that you dislike with something that you do like. So you don't like cooking. Do I like cooking? I'm very good at cooking. I just don't like it. I think it's a waste of time. She says, whilst needing to satisfy her most basic need, which is eating. So I would personally pair cooking with a mindset of being able to use this as a time to decompress from the day, and B, with music. So I put music on and I have a good time whilst I'm cooking. I don't particularly like cooking. I really enjoy cooking for other people, and that is a pairing in itself. When my friends come over for dinner, I'm super motivated to want to cook, and I'm really enjoying it because it's been paired with the reward of knowing that someone else is going to enjoy it. If it was just me and I didn't have the discipline that I have, I would probably just have a slice of cheese on toast. Don't judge me. I don't do that, but I would if I could. Sometimes I think I should. Oh God, it's a battle. It's a real battle. So that's step number 1. Pair something that you dislike with something that you do like. And then over time, those two things will become merged, and you'll start to find more enjoyment in that one habit that you really want to adopt that you don't particularly like, but is necessary, like cooking. It's just one of those things that you have to do, right? I mean, can you even get through life without cooking? I mean, I'm sure you can, but in a healthy way? Don't know. Drop it in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Number 2, you have to write down your non-negotiables. What are your non-negotiables? I don't even question myself about going to the gym. I don't negotiate with myself about whether I go to the gym. My back will give in if I don't do it. So I have to do it. And it's not something that I even deliberate in my own mind. The thing that I might deliberate is the time that I go, but I don't actually negotiate with myself about whether I should do it or not. It's just more like, at what point of the week am I going to do it? And that's where my negotiation comes in. So you have to write down what your non-negotiables are. And you might want to start small. You know, maybe you're trying to overhaul your entire life. Maybe you've been extremely unhealthy, smoking, have never exercised, and you want to start running. I would say that personally, it is easier and better to start with one, get into a consistent groove with that one, and then move on to the next thing. Because if you try and change everything all at once, what will happen is you will most likely fall off the bandwagon. Now that's for bigger habits. When you've got smaller habits, little things, like you want to habit stack them, like maybe you want to floss and take your supplements and meditate, those are quote unquote slightly easier things than overhauling your entire diet and going to the gym 3 days a week and then also quitting smoking, right? So you could pair those habit stacking smaller habits together. Those are fine. Those you can probably stack, and the research shows that you can stack up to around 6 together for them to stick, because what will most likely happen is that a couple of them will fall off, and that's absolutely fine. But if you're trying to change a really big habit, personally, from the literature as well, backed up by science, there are debates. The world of studying habits is a bit messy, but what I would personally suggest is you find the big habits, you put them at the top, and those are your big non-negotiables. So let's say you've got 3 big ones. I would break them out into like month 1 to 3, I'll do this, and then obviously continue. You're not just going to stop once you reach month 4, 5, and 6. By month 4, you start adopting that second habit, so 4, 5, and 6. And then by month 7, you start adopting that third one. Those are if you've got 3 really big habits that you want to change, something that's going to take a lot of energy. And then you can put the smaller non-negotiables underneath, something that you do every single day. You maybe put them in a little habit stack, which brings me to my next point. It's kind of like point 2 and 3 are together. So Point 3 is that you want to habit stack the little habits and merge them together so that it becomes a routine. So one behavior is a cue for the next behavior, is a cue and the routine for the next behavior, and so on, and then they all reinforce each other. Step number 4 is you want to celebrate those micro wins. I mean, there are some days where I literally just congratulate myself for replying to the email. I'm like, yeah, good girl, you replied to the email. And sometimes it just is like that, and that's absolutely fine. But we are so busy focusing on the negative, all the things you haven't done, how badly you haven't done them, and how much better you could have done them, that we forget to actually focus on how much we have done. And when we start to focus on the little things and the big things, we actually release dopamine because we're like, oh yeah, no, I sent the email. Oh yeah, I did that. I did feed the dogs. Oh, I took the dogs for a walk. But those things get overlooked sometimes. And I understand why, it's part of that daily thing. But if you're in that particular state where you feel like you're not motivated, you're not proud of yourself, you don't want to do it, go back to basics and focus on the little micro wins. What are the little things that you've done today that have actually brought you to the point where you can now sit down and work? Those little micro wins will then increase dopamine, which will then make you want to continue on that journey. And the next thing you know, you've finished your report. You're welcome. Okay, step number 5 is you want to purposely delay gratification. You want to train your brain to stop prioritizing that immediate reward. It is easier to order on Deliveroo, wherever you are in the world. Again, I've said this. We have Deliveroo in the UK, Uber Eats. It is easier to do that than it is to cook. It is easier to lay down on the sofa and not go to the gym. It is easier to grab your phone and scroll social media instead of doing the thing that you're supposed to be doing. The more you give in to those immediate rewards and you prioritize them, the better your brain will get at saying, well, why would I work for the reward if I can just get the one that's right here? Okay, and that is truly a skill that you can change over time. Like those pathways that I explained, that you've got the ones that have been ingrained, your brain may have ingrained the idea that you can reach for the immediate rewards and you can change that. So I personally know that it feels better to have cooked, and so I just do it. And the last and most final, most important step, step number 6, which is arguably the most valuable piece of information that you need to know, is that your mood is not static. I'm going to say it one more time because it really needs to land. Your mood is not static. If you are lazy lying on the sofa, you can shift into a state that is motivated and wanting to go to the gym. How many times have you put on a song that has made you think, wow, I want to go for a run? Yeah, we can shift our states, and you can do that in very many ways. For me, it's always music. I use music to bring myself up. I use music to bring myself down. I use music to reinforce what I'm feeling. If I'm sad, going through a breakup, whatever, that is the music that I'm listening to. Or I will use the music that gets me into wanting to go for a run. I have a particular playlist and I put it on and I start cueing that behavior, that music, with the potential reward that is going to come with me going for a run. It puts me into motivation drive of wanting to move my body. And so if you're lying on the sofa and you're feeling lazy scrolling, that is because A, you've got that immediate reward right there, so why would your brain want to change that? And B, you can shift from a state of boredom, laziness, into a state of motivation. Your mood is not static. And the true test of a malleable person and a malleable central nervous system is the ability to shift from one state to another. So we're always talking about how we can shift ourselves into a state of calm after being stressed, but you can also shift yourself into a state of stress when you're calm. Now, when I say stress, I don't mean panic, anxiety, worry. I mean stress, which is the body flooding with adrenaline so that it can get you into a place where you will start moving your body on the treadmill, or lifting the weights in the gym, or getting into the car so that you can drive to wherever you're going to work out. Your mood is not static, and the true test of somebody being malleable is whether you can shift from one state to another. It's being able to move yourself from one place to another without lingering in any specific place for too long at your own detriment. Guys, I hope you found this helpful. I would love to hear what your habits are for this year. I would love to see if you need extra support. I am opening up my coaching books this year, which I haven't done for a very long time because I wrote Rewire and then I launched Rewire. So for 2 years, I've only had a couple of clients, a handful of hand-picked clients, but I'm opening up my books again. So leave your messages in the comments and keep an eye out for when the coaching opens, because I will be only taking on 5 people at a time. Guys, thank you so much for being here. As always, it's me, Nick, your pocket neuroscientist. I'm always there in your pocket whenever you need me. Please like, comment, and subscribe. I would love it if you could share it with your friends, and I will see you all next week for Dinner Cold Dilemmas.